Florida's property tax amendment landed in court this week. 3 separate lawsuits seek changes to how the ballot measure is worded. In Leon County Wednesday, plaintiffs argued the amendment's language reads like a political sales pitch. For starters, they call the title, quote, "Save Our Homes from Excessive Property Taxes," end quote, suggestive. They also pointed to political taglines in the amendment's provision, pointing to phrases like protecting small businesses and the phrase ensuring fairness. Supporters say the wording simply describes what the measure does. The judge's ruling is expected soon. If approved, Amendment 3 would increase the homestead property tax exemption from $50,000 to $250,000 by 2028. It could cost local governments $12 billion statewide, but also erase non-school property taxes for 60% of homeowners with a homestead. I'd like to start with you, Christina and Travis. How are you seeing all this play out?
Yeah, I think this is not the first time that we've seen a ballot initiative come in front of voters. There always seems like there's a fight over the language, and they're always written in a political way. I think across the board, we can agree that both Democrats and Republicans have come together on this ballot initiative to have real concerns about how this would play out in cities and counties. So I love the conversation that we're looking at the wording, but I think we need to get to a point where maybe we're not doing as many ballot initiatives and we're handling some of these problems in our legislature instead.
Travis?
Well, that might be a point of agreement for us in general, but I will say, obviously, even on this show, I've been a pretty strident supporter of the Homestead Exemption Amendment. The language itself, again, how do you make it more objective if you can? I don't know that you can. The language seems, they're going to look at different tests, like plain language tests. Like what does the amendment say, and does it do what it says? But if we're going to have a discussion about the substantive matters of it, I mean, look, I've said before, I wanted the $500,000 DeSantis plan. Some people have written very comprehensively about this amendment.
That's right. Abigail,
but
you just published an article today where you talk about the different aspects of the property tax amendment. And so tell us about how you see this.
Yes, so while the language of the ballot might be getting litigated at the moment, my concern is more about the numbers. So one of the things that's important to emphasize about this potential amendment or any other is that there are trade-offs. It would create winners and losers. So it's correct that this would have a meaningful impact on reducing property taxes for 60% of Floridians. The relevant question then is, well, where do we make up that lost revenue? And who winds up paying more in taxes should this be passed? And whether or not we're interested in making those types of trade-offs.
Look, there's a lot of doom and gloom in the explainer. Okay, there is. It says there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but we had a surplus of what, 11.8 billion, I think in 2021, 22, something like that. I mean, we've got surpluses. We've got consistent surpluses. And I want to see that seniors like my mom, I always use an example, who's lived in her house for going on 50 years and will maybe die in that house and never have owned her home.
Michael, when you look at what the judge has said, this is not a question of taking this item off of the ballot. It's just how it's worded. When you look at this case, you have Ben Gibson, who's the attorney representing Attorney General James Othmeyer, the Secretary of State, and when he says that voters have common sense, and then you look at the language that's supposed to be free of advocacy terms.
Correct.
How is this coming across for the average person being asked about this when you're doing stories?
Well, the average person, I think, is still at a point where they're reviewing it. I think more important, the leadership across Florida that is needed if this thing is going to pass is kind of ambivalent at this point. Even Governor Ron DeSantis, and Travis, to your point, you were supportive of his original idea. He's basically said, this isn't what I wanted, and so he's not going to be advocating for it. So the question is, if not DeSantis, who will be advocating?
That is correct, but I'm taking I want the $250,000 exemption approach, and then let's see how it works. If we prove then that there are problems that she very, very eloquently laid out in her article, I think then we
But if
take
this
another
ends
look
up on
at
the
it.
ballot, you're going to need somebody out front who just to champion it. And right
Yeah.
now, it's like an orphan. You
I don't know.
It is.
I think, look, I don't know. I haven't seen polling on it. Have you guys seen any internal polling on it that says?
I think we're so early in the process. We
Well,
don't have determined ballot.
There was an
language yet.
interesting poll that was done by the University of North Florida, and that survey really shows how important the language is. Because when they surveyed, they had 848 voters who said that they are going to vote in the midterm, and when they surveyed them, 61% supported the measure when the wording was that it would reserve property tax revenue for core public services. But then when they asked the question, 45% supported when voters were told that the proposal may create an estimated $11.8 billion shortfall over the next 2 years. So this is the same
I
group.
could do a 30-second spot on it and just say, hey, Floridians, if you'd like a tax cut coming up in the next election, you can vote yourself one. A significant tax cut.
And if you would also like to
yeah.
see very clear incoming changes and reductions in essential services, particularly
Both my
in
brothers were
rural
firefighters.
counties.
I love firefighters and cops and all of our essential
Well, then
services,
you would
and I
like to
like
have
good
them
roads
paid.
too. But I'm willing to take a shot at this with the surpluses that we have and the clear revenue over the surpluses we've got, and take a shot at it.
In my professional assessment, this type of policy, while I'm sympathetic to the underlying questions and sympathies surrounding, as a Florida homeowner, property taxes and whether or not you actually own your home if you are still paying taxes. The question is one of, is this policy the most effective way of achieving that goal while preserving the things that many people in our communities rely on? And I think that this policy, frankly, is an overly blunt instrument.
People's property tax is the single most biggest bill that they get in the year in
Christina, what were you
Florida.
going to
I
say?
think part of this too is that all of these ballot initiatives are going to take enormous education to the public, right? So if this passes, do your costs go up somewhere else to then go what we're talking about? Where do police get paid from and firefighters? Is this just some sort of cost shifting away from one tax to another tax that we might see somewhere else? And so this is where educating voters is going to become key.